I never thought I'd live to hear those words come from someone I'd given everything to. "You're just a useless servant," he spat out the first time, like it was some joke. The second time, he said it in front of the whole family, like I was nothing more than a doormat for his big plans. And the third time, I felt something inside me snap. I'd stood by his side through the worst of it, through hospital stays, job losses, tears at midnight. I'd given him my time, my heart, my savings, and still, in his eyes, I was just the help. Someone to cook his meals, clean his mess, pick up his pieces. I'd always believed that family meant loyalty, respect, love. That blood was thicker than water. But in that moment, staring at the floor so he wouldn't see the tears welling up, I realized sometimes the people you die for would kill you with words instead. So I decided, if he thought I was a servant, I'd show him what a strong servant looks like. But then, before I tell you how it all unfolded, hit that like button, share where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this. Now, let's dive in. I'm Margaret Lewis, 68, a retired teacher who spent her entire life nurturing others, my students, my family, my own children, thinking love and sacrifice would be enough. I believed kindness would always come back around, but nothing prepared me for the way his words would slice through me that day. I never imagined it would come to this. I always believed that love, patience, and sacrifice would hold a family together, that the time and energy I poured into every relationship would create a bond too strong to break. But that's not how life always works out. My name is Margaret Lewis, and I'm a retired teacher. For nearly 40 years, I poured myself into my job and into my home, believing every act of service, every extra hour spent helping, would come back around in the form of respect, gratitude, and love. I raised 2 children on my own after my husband died. I scrimped and saved, skipped vacations, and went without new clothes just to make sure they had what they needed: tuition, textbooks, even the little extras that made them smile. I wanted them to have the kind of security and opportunities I never did. When my eldest married, I welcomed my daughter-in-law with open arms. I treated her like my own child, making her favorite meals, offering to babysit so she and my son could have date nights, and even helping them financially with the down payment on their first home. She always thanked me with polite smiles and quick hugs that felt genuine enough. But now I see the cracks that were always there. Little dismissive comments I'd brush off, subtle sighs when I offered advice. I lived in their home after my health began to decline, believing it would be easier for them to look after me than for me to manage on my own. I wanted to be helpful, not a burden, so I cleaned, cooked, folded their laundry, and tried to show my appreciation every day. I even paid my share of the bills, never wanting to be seen as taking advantage. But I started to notice the shift, the looks exchanged across the dinner table when I spoke, the tone that dripped with impatience, and the way they'd talk over me like I didn't exist. It was like I'd become an obligation rather than a loved one. I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe they were just stressed. Jobs, bills, kids. I'd been there before. Then one evening, while setting the table for dinner, my daughter-in-law turned to me and said it, called me a useless servant. Her voice was so calm, so matter-of-fact, as if she was stating an undeniable truth. My son didn't defend me. He just shifted uncomfortably and pretended he didn't hear. I don't know if it was that moment or the accumulation of all the little slights over the years, but something in me cracked. That night, as I lay awake in the small guest room that felt more like a storage closet than a home, I realized I'd spent my life serving people who had forgotten how to love. And in that realization, I found the seed of a strength I never knew I had. A strength that would change everything. The first time she called me a useless servant, it stung like a slap. I was making dinner just like I always did. Spaghetti and garlic bread. A recipe I'd made 100 times. My daughter-in-law was on the phone, pacing in the kitchen, complaining to someone about how the maid, meaning me, had burned the bread. I froze mid-stir, my hands trembling, heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. I tried to laugh it off. "I'm sorry. I'll be more careful next time," I said. But the way she looked at me, like I wasn't even worth her time, left a bruise that never fully healed. The second time it happened was in front of my son. We were in the living room, folding laundry together. Well, I was folding, and he was watching TV. She walked in, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "If you're going to live here rent-free, at least be useful," she said. "Otherwise, what's the point? You're just a useless servant taking up space." My son flinched, looked at the floor, but said nothing. My heart cracked a little more that day. I told myself it was stress. Maybe she was tired from work, or maybe they'd argued earlier. I tried to remember all the good moments, how I'd helped them move, how I'd babysat on short notice, how I'd cleaned their entire house after my daughter-in-law's surgery so she could rest. I clung to those memories like a lifeline, desperate to believe that deep down she still saw me as family. But then came the third time, and it broke something inside me that I didn't even know could break. It was a Sunday evening. I'd spent the entire day preparing a roast dinner. Potatoes, vegetables, the works. I wanted to remind them of all the Sunday dinners we'd shared when the kids were small, the laughter around the table. Maybe if I recreated that warmth, she'd remember who I was, what I'd done for them. I set the table just like I used to. Napkins folded neatly, plates warmed, candles lit. They walked in late, distracted by their phones. My son glanced at the table and muttered, "Oh, she's still at it, huh?" My daughter-in-law didn't even sit down. She just stood there, arms folded, eyes cold and hard. "You really don't get it, do you?" she said. "You're just a useless servant. We don't need you to play house. We need you to stop getting in the way." I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at my son, waiting for him to say something, anything. He looked down at his phone, like he couldn't bear to meet my eyes. My hands shook as I held the serving spoon. The roast was perfect, the gravy rich and warm. I'd tried so hard to make everything just right, but all I felt was invisible. I couldn't even find the words to respond. I just stood there, staring at the table I'd set, the meal I'd cooked, the family I thought I'd helped build. And in that silence, something shifted inside me. The woman who'd sacrificed, who'd bent over backward to make them happy, who'd accepted every insult and every eye roll, she was gone. In her place was a woman who knew she didn't deserve to be treated like that. A woman who realized that no amount of love could change someone who didn't value her. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't stand there and be their servant anymore. They thought they could use me, discard me, like I was nothing. But I still had a voice. I still had strength. And the next time they saw me, they'd realize just how wrong they'd been. After that night at the dinner table, I tried to pretend nothing had changed. But every time I saw her face, that word, useless servant, echoed in my mind like a curse. I would catch myself hesitating before speaking, my voice suddenly small. Every step I took in that house felt like I was walking on glass. I tried to talk to them the next morning. I set the coffee pot on the counter, poured 2 mugs, just like I'd done for years, and asked my son if we could talk privately. He sighed, eyes glued to his phone. "Mom, not now. We're busy." He didn't even look up, like I was interrupting something more important, some notification or social media post. I waited for the right moment all day. In the afternoon, I found my daughter-in-law alone in the living room, scrolling through her laptop. I took a deep breath. "Can we talk about what you said last night?" She barely moved. "What did I say?" she asked, voice dripping with disinterest. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You called me a useless servant. That hurt." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. Don't be so sensitive. It was a joke." A joke? I felt like my chest was on fire. She closed her laptop and stood, brushing past me like I was a piece of furniture. "You need to toughen up, Margaret," she muttered. "Honestly, you're too dramatic." I turned to my son for support. When he came home from work, I tried again. "Honey, I need to talk about what she said, about how she's been treating me." He didn't even take off his jacket before shaking his head. "Mom, please, she's just stressed. Don't take everything so personally." He gave me that look, the one that says, "You're the problem, not her." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words just disappeared. My voice felt like it had been stolen. Every day after that, it got worse. Little comments, sharp as knives, left in the air like poison. "Can you at least do something useful today?" "We'll handle it, Margaret. You've done enough." I started to believe them. Maybe I was just a burden. Maybe I was a servant. After all, who was I now? A retired teacher, a widow, a mother whose only child wouldn't stand up for her. I found myself cleaning more, trying to prove I still mattered. I cooked dinners they barely touched. I folded laundry they never thanked me for. I'd become invisible, a ghost in the home I'd once helped build. And every night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd gotten here. Wondering if I'd ever meant anything at all. But somewhere deep inside, a spark refused to die. I remembered the woman I'd been, the teacher who'd inspired kids, the mother who'd held my son through nightmares, the wife who'd nursed my husband through his final days. I wasn't a servant. I wasn't useless. I had given everything, and they'd given me nothing but pain in return. I felt something building inside me. A fire, a refusal to be silenced anymore. I knew I couldn't change them, but I could change myself. I could take control. The thought terrified me, but it also gave me hope. Because even though they treated me like I was worthless, I knew I still had worth. And the next time they tried to push me down, I'd be ready to stand tall. That night, I sat at the small table in my room, the same one I used to help my students with their homework decades ago. I stared at the old wooden grain, running my fingers over the scratches and nicks that time had left. My mind replayed every insult, every dismissal, every time they made me feel like I didn't belong in my own home. I wasn't a servant. I wasn't worthless. I'd spent my life building others up, showing them love and patience and understanding. Why was it so easy for them to tear me down? A memory came to me, a former student who'd faced relentless bullying. I'd told her once, "People will treat you the way you allow them to." Back then, I'd believed in her strength. Why didn't I believe in my own? I reached for my phone and dialed Evelyn's number. Evelyn and I had taught together for over 20 years. She'd always been my rock. When she answered, her voice was warm and comforting. "Margaret? You sound tired. Are you okay?" I hesitated, then let it all spill out. The insults, the betrayal, the way my own family made me feel like a burden. "Oh, honey," she said after I finished, her voice thick with emotion. "That's not right. You've given them everything, and they've given you nothing but pain. You deserve better." I felt a tear slip down my cheek. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "I'm scared of making things worse. I'm scared of losing them altogether." She was quiet for a moment. "Margaret," she said gently, "sometimes losing people who hurt you is the best thing that can happen. You can't keep giving them power over your happiness." Her words hit me like a jolt. I'd been living in fear of losing their love. Yet I realized they'd stopped giving me love a long time ago. I didn't need their approval to matter. Evelyn suggested I talk to a lawyer about my financial rights and maybe even consider moving out. Somewhere I could live in peace. The idea felt scary, but also liberating. I'd spent so long putting everyone else first, I'd forgotten how to stand up for myself. That night, I didn't sleep much. But for the first time in weeks, it wasn't because of sadness. It was because of a spark, a fire that had been lit inside me. A plan was forming. I would no longer let them define my worth. I'd find a way to show them that I was stronger than they ever imagined. I might not know exactly what the future held, but I knew one thing. I was done being their servant. I was done being silent. I was Margaret Lewis, and I was about to remind them exactly who they were dealing with. I called them all into the living room that Sunday morning, the place where birthdays were once celebrated, where Christmas trees once glowed, where laughter and tears used to echo through the walls. Now, it felt cold, like a shell of what it once was. Margaret Lewis, 68, the so-called useless servant, had finally had enough. I stood in front of them, my son, his wife, the woman who'd called me that name, and even my granddaughter, who watched from the couch, eyes wide with confusion. My hands trembled slightly, but I steadied them on the back of the old armchair. "I've called you here because I need to talk," I began, my voice steady, but laced with the ache of betrayal. "I've given this family everything I had, my time, my money, my love, and I was repaid with disrespect and cruelty." My daughter-in-law crossed her arms and smirked, but I didn't let it break my resolve. "You think you can treat me like I'm disposable? Like I'm some burden to carry until I finally disappear?" She scoffed. "Margaret, you're being dramatic. We were just frustrated." "Frustrated?" I repeated, my tone sharp as a blade. "You called me a useless servant 3 times. You laughed while you said it. That's not frustration. That's contempt. And I won't stand for it anymore." My son shifted uncomfortably, guilt flickering across his face. "Mom, maybe we said things we didn't mean." "Didn't mean?" I snapped, my voice cracking. "You said exactly what you meant. You meant to put me in my place. But here's the thing. You've forgotten whose place this really is." I reached into my purse and pulled out the folded documents I'd spent days preparing. The new will, the transfer papers, the cancellation of every automatic payment I'd set up for them. "Effective immediately," I continued, my voice like iron. "You'll pay your own way. The utilities, the groceries, the house upkeep, it's all yours now. And if you can't manage that, you're free to leave. I've spoken to a lawyer. This house is going up for sale in the morning." My daughter-in-law's face paled. My son's mouth fell open, words scrambling for an escape. "Mom, please," he said, voice trembling. "Where will we go? We have nowhere to stay. The kids." I stared at him, tears brimming but refusing to fall. "You should have thought of that before you let your wife talk to me like that, before you stood by and let her treat me like dirt in my own home." He took a step toward me, desperate now. "Please, Mom, don't do this. We can make it right." I held up a hand. "Number, I gave you every chance. I stayed silent for too long. You don't get to break me down and expect me to keep building you up." The daughter-in-law's eyes darted to the papers in my hand, then back to me. "You can't do this. We'll fight you." I looked her square in the eye. "Then fight. But know this. I'm done fighting for people who see me as a servant. I'm fighting for myself now." The room fell silent, the tension thick as a storm cloud, and then the twist I hadn't expected. My granddaughter stood up, eyes welling with tears. "Grandma, I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't know. I thought they cared. I didn't know they treated you that way." Her words broke something in me, a small, hidden piece that still wanted to believe in family. I reached for her hand. "It's not your fault, sweetheart," I said softly. "But it's time for me to look out for myself now. You'll understand one day." And with that, I turned away from them all, my son's pleas, his wife's angry protests and walked toward the front door. My heart was heavy, but my spine had never felt so straight. The old Margaret might have stayed silent, but this time, I chose my own dignity. I packed my last box that afternoon: photo albums, a handful of keepsakes, and my grandmother's old teapot, items that held meaning beyond the house that now felt like a prison. As I sealed it shut, I felt a weight lift from my chest. Margaret Lewis, 68, was no longer the useless servant in her own home. I was a woman reclaiming her dignity. I stood in the living room one last time, looking at the walls that had witnessed so much: laughter, tears, birthdays, and heartbreak. My son's angry words still echoed in my head. "You're just a burden, Mom." My daughter-in-law's dismissive tone, the maid. But the memory that hurt most wasn't their words. It was the way I had let those words define me. For too long, I had believed that my worth depended on their approval. That belief shattered the moment I took back control. I had always been the one making sacrifices, paying bills, cooking meals, babysitting their children, so they could chase their dreams while I put mine on hold. Every time they needed me, I had said yes. Every time they needed money, I had opened my wallet. I thought that was love. But love doesn't sound like insults over dinner. Love doesn't laugh at your pain. I moved into a small but cozy apartment on the edge of town, a place with bright windows, a balcony, and a little garden that would soon be full of herbs and flowers. It was quiet, peaceful, mine. I slept my first night there without checking my phone for a text asking for favors or waking to footsteps in the hall. I woke up to birdsong, not arguments. I made coffee and sipped it slowly, no one demanding I be somewhere or do something. For the first time in years, I felt free. Sometimes I wondered what they were doing now. My son, his wife. If they'd figured out how to manage without me. If they'd realized that kindness is not a weakness, that respect is earned, not demanded. I doubted it, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I started volunteering at the local library, helping kids with reading, sharing stories, watching their eyes light up with wonder. It reminded me that I still had so much to give, to people who actually wanted me around, who appreciated me. I joined a gardening club and made friends who didn't ask for money or favors, just company and laughter. I thought about forgiveness. People told me I should, that it would give me peace. But I realized forgiveness doesn't mean letting them back in. Forgiveness means letting go of the anger, so it doesn't poison what's left of your life. I forgave them, but I didn't forget, and I didn't invite them back into my heart. Looking back, I saw how I'd let their opinions shape my worth. But now I knew, my worth was not defined by them. It was defined by the strength it took to walk away, by the courage it took to say, "No more," by the peace I found in my own company. Margaret Lewis, 68, was no longer their servant. I was my own woman, living on my own terms, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. What would you do if someone called you a useless servant in your own home? Would you fight back or walk away? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your story, because your voice matters and you never know who it might help. If this story struck a chord, please like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales of resilience and family drama. Let's build a community of strength and support together. Your experiences, your lessons, they matter here. So, let's keep the conversation going.